This video will show you how to set up a VPN using OpenVPN with some automated scripts I've created that make the process drastically simpler and easier. The scripts I've created use just about every bell and whistle that's available in OpenVPN to maximize your security and the efficiency and capabilities of your resulting VPN network. First of all, go to OpenVPN.net's community downloads page and download the OpenVPN program itself and the GNU PG signature and verify your download. I've already downloaded the installer to my desktop here. Then you can either click on the link below for my automated scripts, or you can go to a web browser and type in stalwart.ca/OVPNSetup.zip. Now right-click on the OpenVPN installer. Run as administrator. Click Next. I agree. Check the RSA certificate management scripts. My scripts don't rely on these scripts, but they do rely on the existence of the easy-RSA subfolder, which should exist inside the OpenVPN installation. Optionally, uncheck the GUI. I just personally never bother with it. Click Next. Now copy the location where OpenVPN is going to install and note the drive and the directory. Click Install. Next, and finished. Now we'll extract my automated scripts. So open that file, and just for your information, detailed instructions along with a disclaimer followed by abbreviated instructions for the more experienced are available in install.html. We're going to extract all of these files to the easy-RSA subfolder. So paste in the location of OpenVPN and add /easy-RSA to the end of it. Click Extract and then click Continue to provide administrator permission to copy to that folder. Now you can close these windows. Now we'll open an administrative command prompt. So while holding the Windows key down, press X. Then you can either click on Command Prompt Admin or just press A. Now we'll go into the OpenVPN's easy-RSA subfolder. So cd equals, and I'll paste, /e tab. Now use Notepad to edit the vars.bat file. In this file, we'll verify that the variables that it sets up are appropriate for the server that we're setting up. First of all, confirm that the home folder is pointing to the correct drive and directory. It should point at the easy-RSA subfolder, and note that there's no trailing slash after easy-RSA. Next, you'll choose your key size. This is how big and bad your encryption is. The default key size of 1024 is great because it gives you a reasonable amount of encryption while giving you good network performance. The larger your key, the better your encryption, but the slower your network performance because the keys are bigger and there's more math involved and everything. Some other common values that are used are 2048 and 4096. Then confirm your country, state or province, city, organization, and enter your email address. Then, and very importantly, you'll set up your server name. This will either be a fully qualified domain name, like it could be a dynamic DNS host name, or it'll be something like your static external IP address. Just for this example, because I'm only setting this VPN up on my LAN, and it's going to be deleted right away afterwards anyway, I'm going to use my local host name. Whatever you set this to, just make sure that it's an address that is accessible on the network to your clients who are going to be connecting to your VPN network. You may want to reduce the expiry. That's how long a certificate is good for after you create it. I set it really high here, which is 10 years. You may want to set it right down to 1 year or even less. It just depends on how often you want to have to recreate your certificates for all of your clients and everything. Then you'll decide on a subnet for your TAP connections. We're going to basically create 2 types of VPNs in order to be compatible with things like iPads and Android devices and Windows and other systems. First of all, the TAP device, which is the most robust, it basically operates at the IP level, the Ethernet level, layer 2, and is capable of doing things like network bridging. It's generally what you'll want to use whenever you have the chance. But devices like typically Android devices and iPads, iOS, doesn't support TAP devices. So it has to use a tongue connection. So we'll have 2 networks going on here. Make sure that the subnet for the TAP network is at least slightly different from the subnet for the TON network. Likewise, make sure that the port that your clients are going to connect to the VPN on is different for the TAP than it is for the TON. These 2 ports are the only ports that you'll need to open up if you have a router, and the traffic for both of these connections is set to UDP. Some configurations use TCP, but you get better performance with UDP. So UDP traffic for both these ports, and those are the only ones you need to set up. If you have any other services that are going to run over your tunnel, those will be handled by your software firewall, because basically your router won't know what's going on inside of the tunnel because that's all encrypted. Since we're not going to have like 300 clients connecting to our networks, these subnet masks and subnet values are fine. Now you can close and save this file. Now we'll actually create a second network device, because since we're using TAP and TON, we need 2 devices, but OpenVPN by default only sets up 1. Go to your Network and Sharing Center and click on Change Adapter Settings. Here's the one default device that OpenVPN creates. You'll notice it says TAP-Windows Adapter v9 underneath it. Go to your Start menu and look for a section called TAP Windows. Within that section, look for Add a new TAP Virtual Ethernet Adapter. Right-click on it. Run as administrator. If you don't run as administrator, it won't work properly. Once it's done, press enter, and you'll notice a second device is created. Now we'll need to rename these devices, and very specifically, in order for OpenVPN to be able to use them. First, name one of them to be the exact server name that you selected in your vars.bat file. So my local host in this case. Or it would be your dynamic DNS name or your external IP address if you use that, but it has to be exactly the same as what you set in your vars.bat file. Now rename the second device to the same thing, except add to the end of it space, open bracket, lowercase tun, close bracket. So that's space bracket ton bracket. If you misname either of these at all, OpenVPN won't be able to see them, and you'll get an error when OpenVPN tries to start and the connections won't be able to begin. Now you can close these windows. Now we're going to actually set up the server configuration files, which is really easy. So in the administrative command prompt, from within the easy-rsa subfolder, type in server and hit enter. It'll give you the usual copyright spiel and a warning about if you fill in values incorrectly, you may end up with a blank cert section in your configuration file. Just hit enter twice. Just for your information, this script builds the CA, the DH, The key server sets up TLS authentication, generates the certificate revocation list, creates both a TAP and a TON server configuration file, and installs the resulting two configuration files into your OpenVPN's config folder. This script also draws from the values that you set up in your vars.bat file. You'll see them as default values within the square brackets. Basically, because it's drawing from that file, I can just hit enter to use the defaults. Now it's building the DH. Depending on your key size, this can take a very long time. Because I'm using just a 1024 key size, which is pretty small, it'll just take a few seconds. Sometimes it can take as much as like 2 minutes, but it'll probably be done in just a few seconds. It takes exponentially longer if you have a larger key. So if you have a key like 4096, it'll take a very long time. It can even take hours, or even days if you have something massive and you're playing around with, like, 8192 or something. This is actually a little bit long for 1024. It should be done any moment. Sometimes it literally takes 10 seconds. Oh, brother. Yeah, this is exceptionally long for 1024. Sorry about this. Okay, it's done. Now it's building the key server, and it'll confirm a few additional values that are also drawn from the vars.bat file. But after it asks for an email address, it'll ask for a challenge password. You'll almost never need to enter this again. This is only theoretically entered when you go to revoke a certificate in certain situations with certain CAs, certificate authorities. But in my experience, it's pretty much never asked for. You will need to set a value here though, or else the certs won't be created correctly. You'll just end up with like blank cert sections. So I'm just going to type in a sample pass, and you'll note that it echoes what you're typing, so look over your shoulder and make sure that no one can see what password you're typing. You'll probably want to remember this value, but again, you'll probably never have to enter it again. I'll just leave the company name blank. Now press Y and enter to sign the certificate, and Y and enter to commit the changes to the database. And the server is all set up. So I'll show you the resulting configuration files that were generated by what we just did. So in OpenVPN's config folder, you'll now see one file for the TON network and one file for the TAP network. Again, the TAP network operates at like the Ethernet level, layer 2. And it's good for things like bridging and stuff, like network bridges. The TON adapter will operate at the IP level, which is layer 3. So basically that's like used for routing and stuff. Now we'll set up a client. So from the EasyRSA subfolder, again we're in an administrative command prompt, type in client space, and let's say I have a friend named Joe. I need to come up with some kind of identifier for Joe's connection. That can either be an arbitrary identifier, or it can be something like Joe's dynamic DNS host name, or it could be Joe's external static IP address, but it doesn't really need to be something that's pingable or whatever. So in this case, I'll just type in Joe. Now let's say Joe is on an iPad. If he was, we could type in TON as a second variable, and it would create a TON connection for Joe. When we set up the server, it sets up both TAP and TON, but when we set up a client, it only sets up the connection type that we specify for that client, just so there aren't too many things floating around. We're going to make it a TAP connection though, just because that's usually what we end up using. You know, it's not too often you connect an iPad or whatever. So the client script is basically like the server script. It gives the same copyright spiel and warning and all that. And then it also draws from the variables in var.bat. Now, since my imaginary friend Joe is on my local area network, just because this example is using my local host name, he's going to be in the same country and province and city and everything. I'll just use the default values. But it will ask you for a challenge password for Joe. Joe will not need to know what this password is, and you'll probably never need to enter it later. This is just like the other password that you entered for the server configuration. So I'll just type in sample pass again. Then hit Y and enter to sign his certificate, and Y and enter to commit the changes to the database. And now, if I do a search for OVPN files within the Easy RSA subfolder, it'll show you all of the clients that I've set up. And here's Joe's file. Now all you need to do is find some secure way to get this file over to Joe's computer. And you would put this file in Joe's program file /OpenVPN/config folder. You'd also just need to make sure that Joe has a tap device on his computer, like in his network and sharing center, that has the exact same name as your server identifier, your server name that's in your var.bat file. So in my case, you'll notice it says Joe, his connection identifier, at my server identifier .ovpn. So your server identifier might be something like someplace.com with .ovpn for the end of the file name here. I'll just show you quickly what the inside of Joe's configuration file looks like. It's basically a bunch of files that are consolidated into one. So you'll see the regular kind of OpenVPN setup stuff, and it shows it's a client, it's using a tap device, and it uses a UDP protocol, which both TAP and TON are using for my scripts. Sometimes people use TCP, but it doesn't work as well. I've had problems with it, and it's lower performance. And you'll see here where it's explicitly stating that it's using a network device by the name of our server name. And also, the TLS auth file is embedded, as well as the CA file, the cert, and the key. So it's really boiling everything down to one file. Normally when you set up OpenVPN, you've got to deal with several different files, and it's a big giant hassle, especially when you have many clients, and it's nice to just be able to deal with one single file. And if I ever want to revoke Joe's access, in my scripts, when I use the client script, for example, if I use the client script to recreate Joe's connection, it would revoke his existing certificate, so old certificates can't be abused. And if I wanted to revoke his access, one way I can do it, aside from using the normal ways, is I can just simply go client space Joe, hit enter, and not give him the new file. Quick and easy. So basically, we need to start up the OpenVPN service now. So open services.msc and look for a service called OpenVPN service. On the client, and especially on the server, you'll probably want to change the startup type to automatic. We can start it right now. It started successfully. Sometimes when you start it, there might be an error. Every once in a while, you just need to try a second time to start it. It's pretty rare that that happens. But if you have an error every single time you try to start it, You've probably either misnamed one of your network devices, or you have an error in one of your OVPN files, like your server configuration file, or you don't have network connectivity, something like that. So you can close that off. And remember, only send the client files like joe at stalwart-office.ovpn to your clients. You shouldn't send them any other files, no other key files, no other OVPN files. Now that the server's running, I can actually ping them. So the tap device will actually be at 10.0.1.1, and the ton device will be 10.0.2.1, so you can see they're up. Now remember that since everything within the tunnel is encrypted, let's say Joe connects and you decide to run an FTP server on your tunnel, and Joe tries to log into your FTP server through the tunnel. If Joe is unable to log in and to access your FTP server, it won't have anything to do with your router, because your router doesn't know what's in the tunnel because it's all encrypted. So the first thing to check if you have problems is check your software firewall. Even if you have your Windows firewall disabled, sometimes you actually need to enable the firewall, and then you need to enable a rule to allow that specific traffic to go through. And you can even lock down the traffic just to the tunnel address and say only allow, set the scope for an input rule, for example, in your Windows firewall. So you can say only allow people to connect who are coming from my OpenVPN subnets, and only allow them to connect to the actual server address. So yeah, you can lock it down as tightly as you want to. There are even some additional options that are possible in OpenVPN, like having to enter a password in order authenticate to join a VPN, but it's kind of a hassle and the certs are really good, so we're just relying on the certs. But with these scripts that I've created, it lets you still use all of the different functionality of OpenVPN, but pretty much like the vast majority, almost all the bells and whistles are enabled for you. So I think that's just about it. If you've enjoyed this video, especially the automated scripts, which you'll likely find save you a ton of time and make OpenVPN a joy to use, because it's a complicated program. And I've spent a lot of time on these scripts. They've taken a lot of work, even though they're so condensed and everything. This took a lot. So please feel free to donate a few dollars to me through PayPal at tyoung@stalwart.ca or through Bitcoin at my address below. I do have several other scripts. I just don't normally release anything I write. But if this goes well, I may release some other relevant scripts that I have all kinds of them that do things like make the connections more fault tolerant. If anything goes down, like it constantly checks the status of everything, and other very interesting stuff. So thanks for listening and have fun.